The torrential rain pounded against the windows of the city's most exclusive restaurant when a 38-year-old businessman, known for his multi-million-dollar fortune and meticulous personality, rushed into the establishment. His custom-made Italian clothes were soaked, water dripping from the fine fabric of his charcoal grey suit, leaving a trail of droplets on the gleaming marble lobby. The maître d' hurried to receive him with towels and effusive apologies, but Damien Cortázar barely registered him. What truly captured his attention wasn't the comfort of the luxurious atmosphere or the imported floral arrangements perfuming the air with gardenia fragrance. It was the scene he witnessed near the kitchen entrance. A 29-year-old waitress, her simple uniform stained with tomato sauce, was kneeling beside an elderly man who had fallen after tripping on the Persian carpet at the entrance. While the other employees watched without knowing what to do, paralyzed by uncertainty and fear of making a mistake, she held the trembling hand of the older gentleman. She spoke to him in a low, comforting voice, words that Damien couldn't quite hear but whose gentle tone cut through the restaurant's murmur like an unexpected melody. With delicate movements, she discreetly wiped away the tears of embarrassment sliding down the wrinkled face of the elderly man. There was no rush in her gestures, no impatience, only genuine compassion that emanated from her like natural light. The millionaire stood frozen in the middle of the lobby, his soaked suit dripping onto the floor as he observed this authentic demonstration of humanity. Something he hadn't witnessed in years in his world of cold contracts, corporate mergers, and negotiations where every smile concealed a calculated agenda. In that instant, as the waitress helped the elderly man to his feet with infinite patience, Damien Cortázar felt a crack form in the armor he had built around his heart for over a decade. The restaurant manager approached nervously, murmuring apologies and offering Mr. Cortázar his usual table. Damien nodded distractedly, unable to take his eyes off the young woman who was now accompanying the elderly man to his table, making sure he was comfortable before returning to her duties. There was something in the way she moved, with purpose but without artificial urgency, that disturbed him profoundly. When he finally reached his table by the window, Damien couldn't concentrate on the menu he knew by heart. His eyes involuntarily sought that figure among the other waitresses. She had chestnut hair pulled back in a practical bun, some rebellious strands escaping to frame a face with delicate but determined features. Her hands showed signs of hard work, small calluses and short, unpolished nails. She wore no elaborate makeup, only the essentials. And there was something in her honey-colored eyes, a silent determination mixed with genuine warmth, that fascinated him in ways he couldn't understand. Throughout dinner, Damien was aware of every time she passed near his table. He watched her interact with other customers, memorizing their orders without needing to write them down, smiling sincerely when a diner shared an anecdote, always finding a moment to chat with the loneliest customers, especially the elderly who dined alone. It wasn't the mechanical, professional service he knew. It was something deeper, more human. When it came time to pay, Damien left a generous but not exorbitant tip, afraid of offending her in some way he didn't yet understand. As he left the restaurant into the rainy night, he stopped under the entrance awning and looked back through the illuminated windows. The waitress was cleaning a table, moving with the efficiency of someone who knows every corner of their workplace. And in that moment, Damien Cortázar, a man who had built an empire with iron determination and calculated coldness, realized something that terrified him. He was completely lost. The following days passed in a strange fog for Damien. He cancelled business dinners at exclusive clubs, postponed meetings with Japanese investors, and even declined an invitation to a charity gala where he usually cultivated valuable contacts. His partners looked at him with growing concern, wondering what had caused this inexplicable change in the man who lived and breathed business strategy. The truth was as simple as it was disconcerting. Damien had begun frequenting the restaurant with a regularity that he himself found irrational. Every night at 8 o'clock sharp, he arrived and requested the same discreet corner table from where he could observe the entire dining room without being too conspicuous. The manager was no longer surprised to see him, simply nodding with respect and leading him to his usual table. From that strategic position, Damien studied the waitress like a researcher studying an inexplicable phenomenon. Her name was Valeria, he had discovered upon hearing another employee call her. Valeria Mendez. The name seemed perfectly fitting to him, containing a simple musicality that resonated with her unpretentious nature. He observed how Valeria had a genuinely warm smile for each customer, regardless of whether they ordered the most expensive dish or simply coffee and dessert. She remembered the preferences of regular diners from memory. Mr. Ramirez, who always wanted his steak medium rare and without salt; Mrs. Fontaine, who preferred red wine slightly warm; young Mateo, who came every Friday after getting paid and allowed himself the luxury of a good meal while studying contracts for his law exam. What impressed Damien most was how she found time for human details. Once he saw her accompany an elderly woman to the bathroom because the woman felt insecure walking alone. Another night, he witnessed how she allowed a student without resources to stay at a table for hours with just coffee, without pressuring him to order more or free up the space. And on one particularly memorable occasion, he saw her discreetly prepare a special dish for a girl with food allergies that wasn't on the menu, coordinating with the kitchen to ensure the little one could enjoy her birthday dinner. Valeria always wore her hair pulled back in that practical bun, not for style but out of necessity. Her hands, which Damien had begun to observe with particular fascination, were working hands, long, capable fingers, palms showing small, healed burns from kitchen accidents, short, functional nails. She never wore jewelry, except for a cheap watch and a simple silver ring on her middle finger that seemed to have some sentimental value. Her honey-colored eyes contained stories that Damien longed to know. They were eyes that had seen difficulties, but hadn't hardened, that had known disappointment, but hadn't become cynical. There was a silent determination in that gaze that intrigued him deeply, an inner strength that no corporate leadership course had taught Damien to recognize or value. The millionaire, accustomed to obtaining everything he desired through money, power, or strategic influence, found himself completely disoriented. How did one approach someone like this? All his usual tactics, the superficial charm he employed at social events, the expensive gifts that impressed women in his circle, the exclusive invitations to places where money bought access, all seemed grotesquely inadequate. For 3 months this ritual continued. Damien dined alone at his corner table, ordering dishes he barely tasted, keeping a business folder open as a pretext while his eyes involuntarily followed Valeria around the dining room. She, focused on her work, didn't seem to notice his particular attention, or if she noticed, had the grace not to show it. They were strange nights for Damien, nights when a man who managed consortiums valued in billions sat alone, drinking expensive wine while watching a 29-year-old waitress work with dedication that none of his highly paid executives had ever shown. And each night when he returned to his penthouse with a panoramic ocean view, with his original artworks and designer furniture, the loneliness he had ignored for years hit him with renewed force. Valeria Mendez's life began to present changes that she found profoundly disconcerting. First, a substantial salary increase appeared on her monthly paycheck. When she asked the manager, he explained with a condescending smile that it had been the result of an exceptional performance evaluation conducted by external consultants. Valeria frowned, remembering there had been no formal evaluation, but the manager insisted and quickly changed the subject. Then, 2 weeks later, the envelope arrived at her apartment. Valeria lived in a 3-story building in a modest neighborhood of the city, where the elevator worked 1 out of every 3 days, and the doorman shared gossip with the same generosity with which he shared the morning newspaper. The envelope was thick, made of fine, expensive paper, with the letterhead of Central University, the region's most prestigious institution. With trembling hands, Valeria opened it after her shift, sitting on the worn sofa in her small studio apartment. It was a formal letter, offering her a full scholarship to study business administration. Full scholarship. Tuition, books, materials, everything covered. The letter explained that she had been selected among exceptional candidates who demonstrated potential academic merit and dedication to community service. Valeria read the letter 3 times, then a 4th. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. This was impossible. She had dropped out of school at 16 when her father left, leaving her mother with 4 children and debts that seemed like mountains. Valeria, the oldest, had assumed responsibility for helping support her 3 younger siblings, Sophia, 16, and the twins Lucas and Mateo, 14. For 13 years she had worked, first in a coffee shop, then in a clothing store, later as a kitchen assistant, and finally as a waitress in the restaurant where she now worked. Every penny earned was carefully divided. Rent, food, education for her siblings, microscopic savings for emergencies. The idea of studying, of dedicating time to herself, was a luxury as distant as traveling to the moon. And yet, here was this opportunity, falling from the sky like an inexplicable miracle. Valeria was deeply independent, proud of every achievement obtained through her own effort and sacrifice. This genuine stubbornness came from having grown up in a neighborhood where favors always came with invisible strings attached, where help frequently transformed into impossible-to-repay moral debt. She kept the letter in a drawer and said nothing to anyone for days. She discreetly researched the scholarship, searching online at the public library computer during her lunch hour. Everything seemed legitimate, too legitimate, which only intensified her suspicion. Meanwhile, Damien had made a decision he himself recognized as problematic. He hired private investigators, not out of mistrust or dark motives, he repeated to himself, but out of a genuine desire to understand Valeria's life without directly invading her privacy. It was a weak rationalization, and he knew it, but the need to know her was stronger than his usual moral compass. The report arrived in a discreet folder delivered to his office. Damien read it during a sleepless early morning, sitting in his Italian leather armchair with an untouched whiskey beside him. Each page revealed a reality that hit him with the force of a punch to the stomach. Valeria Mendez woke up at 5 in the morning every day. Her routine began with preparing breakfast for her 3 younger siblings, making sure they had clean uniforms and packed backpacks. After sending them off to school, she took 2 buses to reach the restaurant at 10 in the morning. She worked the lunch shift that ended at 4. But her day didn't end there. 3 times a week, Valeria attended night classes in a technical accounting course that she paid for with great sacrifice, economizing in every aspect of her life to allow herself this investment in her future. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, she worked the night shift at the restaurant, returning home past midnight on an almost empty bus that dropped her off 3 blocks from her building. On Saturdays and Sundays, when many rested, Valeria volunteered at a community kitchen that served breakfasts and lunches to people in vulnerable situations. The report included photographs the investigators had taken from a distance. Valeria serving soup with the same warm smile she showed at the luxury restaurant, Valeria organizing clothing donations, Valeria sitting on the floor playing with neighborhood children while their parents ate. Her tiny apartment was in a building from the 1960s, where the elevator worked intermittently and the walls retained moisture from past winters. But the photographs showed that she kept it impeccably clean. There were plants on every available surface, succulents on the kitchen window, ferns hanging in the small living room, even cherry tomatoes growing in recycled pots on the tiny balcony. She cared for those plants like they were her children, the report noted, watering them religiously every morning before her siblings woke up. The report also revealed financial details that made Damien close his eyes in pain. Valeria earned just enough to cover basic needs. There was no margin for luxuries, not even for small pleasures. The report listed her meticulously tracked expenses: rent, basic utilities, food, bought at economical markets, never at expensive supermarkets, school supplies for her siblings, clothes at thrift stores, and the accounting course that represented a significant sacrifice. There was no money for entertainment. No trips to movies, no dinners at restaurants, no new clothes for herself. The last pair of shoes she had bought was 6 months old, acquired when the previous ones literally disintegrated after 2 years of constant use. And yet, despite all this difficulty, despite working to exhaustion, despite carrying the weight of a family on her shoulders since she was 16, Valeria maintained that genuine kindness, that capacity to see and respond to the needs of others. The report included testimonials from neighbors, co-workers, people from the community kitchen. All spoke of her with affection and respect. Valeria always has a smile. She's the first to offer help. She never complains, although I know she's exhausted. Damien finished reading the report as the sun began to paint the sky pink and gold over the ocean. He sat staring through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, valued at millions of dollars, filled with luxuries he had accumulated without thinking. And in that moment of brutal honesty, Damien Cortázar recognized a truth that would change the course of his life. He was completely, irrevocably in love. Not with the romantic idea of saving someone in need, not with a fantasy of being the magnanimous hero. He was in love with the strength, dignity, authentic kindness, and extraordinary resilience of this woman, in love with someone who was infinitely richer than him in all the ways that truly mattered. The first real conversation between Damien and Valeria happened in the most awkward way possible. After weeks of simply observing, Damien had meticulously planned the perfect moment to initiate dialogue. He rehearsed possible opening lines, imagined different scenarios, even discreetly consulted with his assistant about what might impress someone who clearly wasn't impressed by money. All that careful planning evaporated when, nervous as a teenager on his first date, Damien accidentally knocked over his glass of red wine onto the immaculate white tablecloth. The ruby liquid spread dramatically, staining the tablecloth and dripping dangerously close to his suit. Valeria arrived almost instantly with clean towels and an expression of serene professionalism. As she cleaned the stain with efficient, practiced movements, Damien stammered multiple apologies, his words stumbling over each other in a manner completely foreign to the confidence he projected in boardrooms directing multi-million-dollar mergers. "Don't worry, sir. It happens all the time," Valeria said with a small smile, her voice having a warm, reassuring quality. "Sorry, sir, I'm so sorry, and I'm normally more coordinated," Damien heard himself say, aware of how ridiculous he sounded. When their eyes finally met, something changed. Valeria had noticed this customer for months, the elegant man who came alone several nights a week, always requesting the same corner table, always observing the dining room with a curious intensity she had learned to recognize. There was something in his grey eyes, a deep loneliness she recognized because she had seen it in the mirror for years. "Is this your first time spilling wine?" she asked with a touch of gentle humor as she finished cleaning. Damien let out a genuine laugh, surprised by the question. "In this restaurant, yes. In my life, unfortunately, no." Valeria smiled more widely. "Then you're in good company. I have regular customers for whom spilling something is almost part of their routine." What began as a brief exchange naturally extended. Damien asked about the floral arrangement on the table, perfectly arranged white gardenias. Valeria explained that the restaurant owner imported them weekly because his late wife loved them. This led to a conversation about flowers, and Valeria mentioned the plants she grew on her small balcony. Damien, who had never cultivated anything in his life but was desperate to maintain the conversation, asked about succulent care. For the first time in months, Damien wasn't thinking strategically about what to say next. The conversation flowed with surprising ease. They talked about the changing weather, about how afternoons were getting longer as summer approached, about a new park that had been inaugurated near the city centre. When Valeria finally had to leave to attend another table, Damien was left with a feeling of warmth he hadn't experienced in years. That night, for the first time since he began frequenting the restaurant, he truly enjoyed his dinner. The following encounters developed gradually. Damien began arriving earlier, when the restaurant was less full and Valeria had more time between tables. Brief conversations became more substantial dialogues. She told him about her siblings, Sophia, who dreamed of being a nurse, the twins who were obsessed with soccer and fought constantly but fiercely defended each other. Damien shared carefully edited stories from his life, omitting the real magnitude of his wealth. He talked about growing up as an only child of absent parents who gave him everything material but nothing emotional, about building his company from scratch after inheriting initial capital from a grandfather he barely knew, about the loneliness that accompanies success when everything in your life becomes transactional. Valeria listened with genuine attention that Damien had never received from people in his social circle, where every conversation was an opportunity to promote agendas or form strategic alliances. She asked thoughtful questions, remembered details from previous conversations, and occasionally offered perspectives that made him think in new ways. It was during one of these conversations that Damien made his first significant mistake. Impulsively, he left an extraordinarily generous tip, equivalent to almost a month of Valeria's salary, discreetly hidden in a white envelope that he placed under his plate before leaving. The next night, when he returned to the restaurant, Valeria was waiting for him. Her expression was difficult to read, a mixture of discomfort and determination. "Mr. Cortázar," she said formally, and the use of his last name hit him like cold water. "I need to return this." She extended the unopened envelope. Damien blinked, confused. "It's a tip. It's for you." "It's too much. I can't accept it." Her voice was firm but not hostile. "Please, your service is always exceptional." "Mr. Cortázar," she interrupted softly, "I appreciate the gesture, but this isn't appropriate. If you want to leave a tip, there are reasonable standards. This—" She held up the envelope. "This is something else, and I can't accept it." The conversation that followed was the first truly honest one between them. Damien, feeling uncomfortably exposed, admitted he only wanted to help. Valeria, with diplomacy but firmness, explained that accepting amounts like this would make her feel like she was being bought, as if her kindness and service had a price that could be paid by wealthy customers. "I've worked all my life," Valeria said, her honey-colored eyes steady, "and everything I have I've earned with my own effort. That's important to me. Do you understand?" Damien nodded slowly, beginning to understand that he had profoundly underestimated how complex and principled this woman was. "Please accept my apologies. It wasn't my intention to offend you." Valeria softened her expression. "I'm not offended. I'm just establishing boundaries. I hope you can respect them." "I can," Damien promised, and in that moment he truly believed it. But the following weeks would reveal how difficult it would be for him to keep that promise, and how deep his need was to find ways to be in Valeria's life, even if she didn't invite him in. After the incident with the excessive tip, Damien had to completely reevaluate his approach. Every instinct developed during decades of business success told him to identify a problem and solve it with resources. Valeria worked too hard for too little money, ergo. He had the means to change that equation, but she had made it clear that this logic didn't apply in her world. During the following weeks, Damien forced himself to slow down, to build a genuine connection without the crutches of money and power. It was unexpectedly difficult. It was like learning a completely new language after speaking only one your entire adult life. He continued visiting the restaurant, but now his conversations with Valeria focused on getting to know each other as people. He discovered that she loved to read, devouring novels she checked out from the public library during her scarce free moments. He learned that her favorite author was Gabriel Garcia Marquez, that the lyrical descriptions of magical realism transported her to worlds where beauty and hope existed even amid difficulty. Damien, who hadn't read fiction since college, found himself visiting bookstores, buying annotated editions of 100 Years of Solitude and Love in the Time of Cholera, trying to understand what touched Valeria's heart in those pages. He read during sleepless nights in his empty penthouse and slowly began to understand the appeal, stories of love that persisted against all logic, of dignity maintained in impossible circumstances, of beauty found in unexpected places. Valeria shared stories about her siblings with evident pride. Sophia, the 16-year-old, was the responsible one, already showing the same caregiving instinct as Valeria. She dreamed of being a pediatric nurse, spent her afternoons after school volunteering at a neighborhood clinic. The twins, Lucas and Mateo, were perfect opposites. Lucas was the dreamer, obsessed with drawing and creating elaborate comics, while Mateo was the pragmatist, fascinated with how things worked, always disassembling broken appliances to try to repair them. "They're my reason for everything," Valeria said one night as she cleaned the table next to where Damien was dining. The late hour meant the restaurant was almost empty, allowing for longer conversations. "When Dad left, Mom collapsed. Literally stayed in bed for months. I was 16. Someone had to keep the house running, keep the little ones fed and in school." "And your mother now?" Damien asked gently. "She finally found stability. Works as an administrative assistant at an elementary school. We don't earn much between the two of us, but it's enough. And the kids are okay. That's what matters." There was a quiet acceptance in her voice, without self-pity or resentment. Simply facts presented as they were, life lived with the dignity of someone who does what's necessary without expecting applause. Damien also began sharing more about himself, deeper layers he rarely showed. He talked about his lonely childhood in a mansion filled with staff but empty of warmth. Parents who attended charity events but never his school games. The business-minded grandfather who only noticed him after Damien's parents died in a car accident when he was 22, leaving him a substantial trust fund and crushing expectations to continue the family legacy. "I built the company beyond what my grandfather ever imagined," Damien confessed one night, swirling his wineglass without drinking. "I multiplied the initial capital 100-fold, and every time I reached a new milestone, I expected to feel something. Satisfaction, maybe, fulfillment, but there was only emptiness, more zeros in the bank account, same fundamental loneliness." Valeria observed him with those perceptive, honey-colored eyes. "Why continue, then, if it doesn't make you happy?" The question was simple, but Damien had no simple answer. "Because it's what I know how to do. Because stopping would mean facing that emptiness directly." "Maybe," Valeria said thoughtfully, "the emptiness is because you're filling your life with things that don't nourish the soul. Money, power, success. They're like processed food. Fill the stomach but don't really nourish the body." The analogy hit him with unexpected force. Valeria had a way of articulating deep truths using simple, direct language. During this period, Damien forced himself to resist the impulse to fix the visible difficulties in Valeria's life. When she mentioned that her building's elevator had been broken for weeks, his fingers instinctively reached for his phone to call his assistant and send a repair team. He stopped himself. When she talked about having to take additional buses because her usual route had been cancelled, he almost offered a car with a driver. He bit his tongue. When she arrived one night with a slight black eye because she had tripped on the dark stairs of her building, he almost bought the entire building to install proper lighting. He took a deep breath and simply asked if she was okay, offering only his genuine concern instead of financial solutions. It was the most difficult challenge of his adult life, being present without trying to control, offering companionship without trying to rescue, building connection without using his most reliable weapon, his wealth. And slowly, imperceptibly, something changed between them. Conversations became deeper, smiles more frequent. Valeria began saving the corner table for him without him having to ask. She started recommending off-menu dishes she knew he would like. And one night, when Damien casually mentioned it was his birthday, Valeria appeared with a small chocolate cake she had convinced the chef to prepare, with a single candle. "No one should spend their birthday alone," she said simply. Damien, looking at the flickering candle, felt something break inside his chest. 39 years, and it was the first time someone had surprised him with something he couldn't buy, that had no hidden agenda, that was simply a gesture of human kindness. "Make a wish," Valeria urged with a soft smile. And Damien, looking at her through the golden light of the candle, already knew what his wish would be. The line between the desire to help and the need to control can be disturbingly thin, especially for someone like Damien Cortázar, accustomed to money-removing obstacles with the ease with which others change television channels. And despite his best intentions, despite the promises he had made to himself to respect Valeria's autonomy, Damien began crossing those lines in ways he rationalized as harmless. It started discreetly, very discreetly. He used his extensive connections to ensure Valeria received shifts with better tips at the restaurant, working with the manager to adjust schedules in a way that seemed natural. He discreetly contacted the university that had issued the original scholarship, increasing the endowment fund with a substantial anonymous donation, ensuring the program could expand and benefit more people like Valeria. When he heard Valeria casually mention that her sister Sophia needed expensive books for her advanced biology classes, Damien arranged for a community donation of textbooks to arrive at the school, making sure Sophia was one of the beneficiaries. When the twins expressed interest in a summer soccer camp the family couldn't afford, Damien anonymously funded a scholarship program for youth in the neighborhood. Each action was justified in his mind as genuine help, interventions that made a real difference in lives that deserved better luck than they had received. But deep down, Damien knew there was also an element of control, a desire to be indispensable in Valeria's life, even if she didn't know he was the source of these fortunate coincidences. The reality was that Damien Cortázar, for the first time in his adult life, was terrified. Terrified that without these interventions, Valeria would drift out of his life as quickly and completely as she had entered it. Terrified that a man nearing 40 with obscene wealth but impoverished human connections had nothing real to offer a woman who already possessed the only things that truly mattered: integrity, kindness, purpose. Meanwhile, Valeria noticed these changes with growing suspicion. The scholarship she had finally accepted, after months of research and verification. The raise that seemed disproportionate to the time she had been at the restaurant. The opportunities that arose for her siblings with timing that was too perfect. She wasn't foolish. She had grown up in neighborhoods where you learned to recognize when something smelled wrong, where survival depended on identifying deceptions before they trapped you. One afternoon during her day off, Valeria visited the university's administrative office. With patience and determination, she spoke with multiple officials until an administrative assistant, moved by her sincerity, discreetly revealed what she shouldn't. The scholarship had been funded by a substantial private donation made specifically for students who demonstrated exceptional merit in customer service in hospitality industries. The criterion was so specific, it practically had her name written on it. Additional investigations, careful conversations with colleagues at the restaurant, some hours on public computers following financial threads. Slowly, Valeria pieced together the puzzle, and when the pieces finally fit, the picture they formed both enraged and devastated her in equal measure. The confrontation happened on a rainy Tuesday, the restaurant almost empty during the afternoon shift. Damien arrived as always, expecting his usual table, his moment of connection with Valeria that had become the anchor of his days. But when she approached his table, her expression was different, cold, controlled, hurt. "I need to talk to you, now," she said without preamble. Damien felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. "Valeria, what?" "Outside." She led him to the restaurant's back terrace, a narrow space where employees took their breaks, smelling of kitchen garbage and stale tobacco. The rain had created puddles on the uneven concrete. "The scholarship," Valeria began, her voice trembling slightly with contained emotion. "The raise, the opportunities for my siblings, all those convenient coincidences. It was you, wasn't it?" Damien opened his mouth, but the words stuck. The guilt must have been obvious on his face. "Why?" The question came out as a contained cry. "Why would you do that? Why would you lie to me?" "I didn't lie. By omission is lying just the same." Tears were beginning to form in her eyes, but she held them back with fierce determination. "I thought these things were mine, that I had earned them, that finally something good was happening to me because I deserved it, not because some rich person decided to play God with my life." "Valeria, wait." "No, you wait." Her voice broke. "Do you have any idea how this feels? To discover that my life, my progress, everything I thought I was achieving on my own was just, what? Your charity project? Your way of buying, what exactly? My gratitude? My affection?" "No." Damien tried to approach, but she stepped back. "It wasn't like that. I just wanted to help. Seeing you work so hard, sacrifice so much, that's my life, my choices, my work. I don't need to be saved, Mr. Cortázar." She spat his last name like poison. "I'm 29 years old. I've supported my family since I was 16. I've survived things you probably can't imagine, and I've done it with my dignity intact because I never depended on anyone else. I know, and that's exactly why you decided you knew better than me what I needed, why you thought you had the right to manipulate my life." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of rain and distant traffic. "You're right," Damien finally said, his voice low and defeated. "You're absolutely right. I crossed lines. Terrible lines. I thought I was helping, but I was really trying to control, trying to secure a place in your life the only way I know how, with money." Valeria wiped her eyes brusquely. "Well, let me tell you something, Mr. Millionaire. You can't buy me. I'm not a business to acquire. I'm not a problem to solve with your checkbook. I'm a person, and if you really cared about me, if you ever really cared, you would have respected that." From her bag, she pulled out several envelopes that Damien immediately recognized, all the excessive tips he had left for months, kept unopened. "Take this, I don't want it. I never wanted it." She threw them onto the cracked plastic table where they landed with the sound of defeat. "And regarding the scholarship, the arrangements at my work, everything, I'm going to reject it all. I'm going to earn my own opportunities again the right way." "Valeria, please." "No, you've done enough." She turned to leave, then stopped, looking at him over her shoulder. "You know what's the worst? I really thought that maybe I had found someone who saw me. Not my situation, not an opportunity to play savior. Me. But you were just another rich man who thinks money can buy what he wants." And with that, Valeria returned to the restaurant, leaving Damien alone in the rain with envelopes full of money that suddenly felt like the most useless things in the world. The 2 months following the confrontation were pure torment for both, though manifested in very different ways. Damien immersed himself in work with almost manic intensity, trying to drown out the constant pain that had taken up residence in his chest. Acquisition meetings that once energized him now felt mechanical and empty. He closed a merger deal valued at $900 million and felt exactly nothing when he signed the final papers. His partners celebrated with expensive champagne. He excused himself early and drove alone to his penthouse where he sat in the darkness watching the city lights flicker like artificial stars. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had reached another pinnacle of business success just when he finally understood how completely insignificant it all was without real human connection. His luxury apartment had transformed into an elegant prison, each immaculate surface and each original artwork only emphasizing the absence of genuine life, of human mess, of warmth. He began questioning fundamental decisions about how he had built his life. The relationships he had cultivated were all transactional, partners who valued him for his capital, social acquaintances who invited him because his presence elevated the status of their events, women who pursued him for his wealth and power. He had confused this with connection, with importance. But Valeria had shown him painfully the difference between being valued for who you are versus what you possess. The nights were the worst. Damien lay awake in his king-size bed with thousand-thread-count Egyptian sheets, counting threads instead of sheep, mentally replaying every moment of his interaction with Valeria. The initial gesture of kindness that had awakened something in him, the conversations that had revealed her complexity and depth, the feeling of genuine connection he had felt for the first time in decades, and finally, the devastating confrontation where she had seen him for exactly what he was, a man trying to buy what should be earned through vulnerability and mutual respect. He realized with brutal clarity that he had replicated exactly the pattern his parents had established, using money as a substitute for real emotional presence, believing that material resources could fill voids that only authentic connection could satisfy. He had despised his parents for this, and yet he had become an amplified version of them. Meanwhile, Valeria's life took an equally difficult turn, though she faced material challenges instead of existential ones. True to her word, she formally declined the university scholarship, a decision that took her 2 days of crying in private before she could sign the declination letter. She spoke with the restaurant manager, insisting he reverse the salary increase, explaining it had been granted under false pretenses. The manager, confused but compliant, adjusted her salary back to the original level. But this stubbornness had real costs. Without the additional income, Valeria needed to take a second job to keep her family afloat. She found work at dawn in a neighborhood bakery, starting at 4 in the morning, kneading bread and preparing pastries until 8, then rushing home to change and get to the restaurant for the lunch shift. Her days now extended from 4 in the morning until 10 at night, with barely hours to sleep. The lack of sleep began affecting her health. Dark circles appeared permanently under her eyes. She lost weight she couldn't afford to lose, her restaurant uniform hanging looser each week. Sophia noticed and expressed concern. Valeria reassured her with smiles that didn't reach her eyes. The twins fought less, united by shared worry for their older sister, who was clearly exhausting herself but refused to admit it. Valeria's pride, which had always been her strength, had transformed into an obstacle. Refusing help was principle for her, but this principle was costing her physical and mental well-being. However, she persisted, determined to prove a point, that she could survive and thrive on her own efforts, without crutches from rich men who thought they knew better. What neither of them anticipated was where they would meet again. The community kitchen where Valeria had volunteered for years operated every Sunday from 9 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon, serving breakfast and lunch to needy families and homeless people. Valeria arrived at 8 to help with preparation, despite her chronic exhaustion. It was the only thing she allowed herself that wasn't strictly necessary for financial survival, because it fed her soul in ways no salary could. Damien, in a genuine attempt to find purpose beyond corporate profits, had begun looking for volunteer opportunities. He didn't want anything public, no charity galas where he could increase his social profile. He wanted something real, something that required his physical presence and effort, not just his checkbook. An employee on his corporate social responsibility team suggested the community kitchen. The first Sunday, Damien appeared, dressed in old jeans and a simple sweatshirt he had bought specifically for the occasion. The kitchen coordinator assigned him to wash dishes. There was no recognition of who he was, no special treatment, just instructions on where the industrial sink was, how to organize clean dishes, and reminders to take breaks to hydrate. Damien worked for 4 hours washing dishes, enormous pots stained with oatmeal, greasy pancake trays, hundreds of glasses and utensils. His hands, accustomed to computer keyboards and corporate handshakes, wrinkled and reddened. His back ached from standing, and he felt more satisfied than he had in months. For weeks, Damien and Valeria worked in the same space without crossing paths. She served food on the line. He was hidden in the kitchen washing. He arrived early and stayed late, working quietly but consistently. The coordinator began to trust him, assigning him additional tasks, organizing food donations, cleaning tables after service, even helping prepare large pots of soup and stew. It was a veteran volunteer who finally connected the dots. Don Ramiro, a man in his 70s who had volunteered at the kitchen for 15 years, frequently worked in the kitchen with Damien. During a break, chatting about their lives, Damien casually mentioned he worked in corporate finance. Cortázar, Don Ramiro repeated when Damien gave his full name in response to a direct question. Damien Cortázar, of Cortázar Investments. Don Ramiro's voice carried more than he intended in the open kitchen. Valeria, who was entering to pick up more serving ladles, stopped dead. She followed the direction of Don Ramiro's voice, and there, by the industrial sink with his hands submerged in soapy water, apron-stained and hair disheveled, was Damien Cortázar. Their eyes met across the bustling kitchen. Time seemed to stop. Damien looked different dressed like this, doing manual labor, genuinely tired. There was something in his posture, a humility that hadn't been present before. Valeria felt something move in her chest, a crack forming in the armor she had so carefully built. But before she could react, lunch service began, and both were swept up in the organized chaos of feeding 200 hungry people. For the moment, conversation would have to wait. When service finally ended in a whirlwind of activity, 200 people fed, hundreds of dishes washed, tables cleaned, leftovers organized for distribution. The kitchen finally fell silent, only the hum of the industrial refrigerator filling the space. Valeria had avoided looking toward the kitchen during the entire service, concentrating fiercely on each task, with determination that bordered on obsessive. But now, as she helped stack chairs, she knew she couldn't avoid the conversation that was coming. Damien emerged from the kitchen drying his hands on a cloth, his apron still stained with water and food remnants. He looked vulnerable in a way Valeria had never witnessed, without the shield of expensive suits and corporate manners, just a man who had spent hours doing honest manual labor. Valeria. His voice was soft, almost fearful. She straightened, holding a chair between them like an involuntary shield. How long have you been coming here? 6 weeks. Why? Damien lowered his gaze, studying the cloth in his hands as if it contained answers. After our conversation, I realized you were right. About everything. I had built a life where money was my only tool, my only way of interacting with the world. I thought coming here, doing something that didn't require my bank account, just my time and effort. He paused, searching for words. I thought maybe I could start to understand what you were trying to teach me. Valeria carefully placed the chair, her mind processing this information. Did you come here because of me? No, Damien answered honestly, finally raising his gaze to meet hers. I came here for me, to try to be better, to find real purpose. I didn't know you also came here. That was destiny, I suppose, or coincidence, or poetic justice. A tense silence stretched between them. Valeria could feel Don Ramiro's curious gaze from across the kitchen, pretending to organize donation boxes while clearly trying to listen. You look tired, Damien said softly, noticing the dark circles under her eyes, the way her weight seemed to have decreased, the fatigue emanating from her. I'm working 2 jobs now. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. The bakery at dawn, the restaurant after. Damien closed his eyes briefly, pain crossing his face. Because of the raise you rejected. Because of my dignity I maintained, she corrected, but without the edge, it would have had months ago. Exhaustion had softened her defensive edges. I'm sorry. The words came out weighted with absolute sincerity. Sorry for manipulating you. Sorry for not respecting your autonomy. Sorry for trying to buy my way into whatever I hoped we would build. You were completely right. I was arrogant, controlling, and completely wrong. Valeria studied him, those honey-colored eyes that had seen so much in her 29 years, now searching for signs of sincerity versus manipulation. But what she saw in Damien's face was something she recognized because she had felt it herself. Genuine shame, real regret. Have you been coming here every Sunday? She asked. Every Sunday. Sometimes Saturdays too if they need extra help. Doing what? Whatever they ask me. Washing dishes, organizing donations, cleaning, cooking. This week I helped repair the broken refrigerator door handle. Turns out watching YouTube tutorials and having functional hands is enough for basic maintenance tasks. Despite herself, Valeria felt a small smile tugging at her lips. The image of Damien Cortázar, multi-millionaire, following YouTube tutorials to repair appliances was absurd and strangely touching. Don Ramiro says you're the most reliable volunteer we've had in months, she admitted. I didn't know he was talking about you. I use only my first name here. No last name, no title, no business context. Just Damien, the guy who washes dishes and occasionally burns rice when trying to cook in large quantities. This time Valeria did laugh, a small but genuine sound, and with that laugh, something began to change in the air between them. I need to sit, Valeria said suddenly, the fatigue hitting her hard now that the adrenaline from service was fading. My feet are killing me. Come, Damien pointed toward the back entrance steps. There's a decent sunset view from there. They sat on the worn concrete steps, just enough space between them, watching the sky begin its transformation from afternoon blue to orange and pink sunset. The air smelled of car exhaust and food being prepared in nearby restaurants, the city's soundtrack providing comforting white noise. I have to confess something to you, Valeria began after a long silence. When I rejected the scholarship, when I insisted on going back to my original salary, part of me knew I was hurting myself, that I was letting pride cost me real opportunities. Damien listened without interrupting, respecting her need to articulate this at her own pace. But I couldn't accept it, she continued. Not because it came from you specifically, but because all my life I've had to earn everything, every single thing. And the idea that something came easily, even if I deserved it, felt like a trap, like I was betraying all those years of struggle. Can I say something? Damien asked softly. Valeria nodded. I think there's a difference between accepting help when you need it and losing your independence. I think recognizing you can't do everything alone doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. He paused, carefully choosing his next words. The way I did things was wrong, completely wrong. I should have talked to you, offered openly, respected your choice. But the instinct behind it, the desire to help someone who works so incredibly hard and deserves better, that instinct wasn't wrong. Valeria absorbed this, her fingers nervously playing with a loose thread on her uniform. My actions were about control, Damien admitted, but my intentions, buried under all the layers of ego and fear, were genuine. I wanted to see you thrive, not so you would owe me something, but because watching you struggle so much when I had means to alleviate that struggle felt morally unsustainable. But it wasn't your decision to make, Valeria said, though her tone was softer now, more reflective than accusatory. No, it wasn't. And that was my fundamental mistake. Damien turned to look at her directly. If I could go back, I would do everything differently. I would talk to you honestly about what I felt, what I wanted to offer you. I would give you power of choice instead of taking it away with well-intentioned manipulation. The sun continued descending, painting long shadows across the alley where they sat. Somewhere nearby, a street vendor shouted offers of fresh fruit. Children played soccer in the street, their shouts of joy floating on the warm afternoon air. "What do you feel now?" Valeria finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. Damien took a deep breath. "I feel that I spent 38 years building walls around my heart, using money and success as bricks. And then I saw you being kind to an elderly man on a rainy day, and something in those walls cracked. I spent months trying to repair the crack with more money, more control, but all I accomplished was destroying the possibility of something real." He turned to look at her completely now, vulnerability naked in his grey eyes. "I feel that knowing you showed me everything I had been missing. Genuine connection, meaningful purpose, the difference between existing and truly living." His voice broke slightly. "And I feel that I ruined any chance we might have had because I didn't know how to be vulnerable, how to trust that I, without my wealth, could be enough for someone like you." Tears began rolling down Valeria's cheeks, silent and unexpected. Months of fatigue, frustration, pain, and now this brutal honesty breaking through all her carefully constructed defenses. "I didn't need you to be rich," she whispered. "I just needed you to be real." "I know," Damien responded, his own eyes shining with contained emotion. "Now I know." They sat together as the sun completed its descent, two people broken in different ways, finally beginning to recognize that maybe, just maybe, their broken pieces could fit together in ways that would make them whole. "Thank you," Valeria said suddenly, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. "For what?" "For learning, for changing, for loving me enough to respect my need for autonomy, for being the man I needed, not the savior I didn't ask for." Damien pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "Thank you for being patient while I learned, for seeing me as capable of change, for loving me despite my monumental mistakes." They remained there under the streetlight, two people from impossibly different worlds who had found their way to something beautifully shared, not because money bought love, not because circumstance created obligation, but because both had chosen, consistently and consciously, to grow toward and with each other. The basil pendant on Valeria's neck caught the light, a small reminder of how far they had come from inappropriate gestures to genuine love. And as they walked toward the future together, hand in hand under emerging stars, both understood the most important lesson their journey had taught. True luxury isn't what money can buy. It's finding someone who sees you completely, who respects your autonomy absolutely, who walks beside you instead of in front or behind. Someone with whom you can build a life based on mutual choice, deep respect and love, that grows from understanding that the best relationships aren't about rescuing or being rescued. They're about growing together, roots intertwined, but each maintaining space to flourish independently, mutually providing fertile ground where dreams can take root and love can grow truly strong. The days following that sunset on the kitchen steps brought a subtle but significant change in the dynamic between Damien and Valeria. There were no dramatic declarations of renewed intentions, no grandiose promises, just a silent agreement to try again, this time with radical honesty as the foundation. Damien stopped visiting the restaurant where Valeria worked. He recognized that space as her professional territory, and his presence there, loaded as it was with their shared history, would only complicate things. Instead, he proposed something different during their next encounter at the community kitchen. "Would you have coffee with me?" he asked after Sunday service, nervous in a way his executives would never have recognized. "Not an expensive dinner, not trying to impress you, just coffee, somewhere simple, to talk." Valeria considered the invitation for a long moment. Her first instinct was to refuse, maintain safe distance. But something in the sincerity of his request, in the way he waited for her answer without pressuring her, made her pause. "I know a place," she said finally. "A neighborhood cafe near my apartment. They make the best sweetbread in the city." "When?" "Next Tuesday? I have the afternoon off between shifts." "Tuesday, then." The cafe turned out to be exactly what Damien needed. A modest space with scratched formica tables, mismatched chairs, and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixing with the smell of baking bread. The owner, a woman in her 60s with a flour-stained apron, greeted Valeria with a maternal hug. "Mija, it's been so long, where have you been?" "Working too much, Doña Carmen," Valeria responded with a tired smile. "As always." Doña Carmen gently scolded her, while serving them coffee and bringing a basket of freshly baked conchas, refusing payment despite Valeria's protests. Damien observed this interaction, moved by the way Valeria was clearly loved and cared for by the people in her community. "You come here frequently," he observed when Doña Carmen returned to the kitchen. "I used to come every week before taking the second job. Doña Carmen has known me since I was 16. When things got tough at home, when I needed space to think, I came here. She always gave me bread and coffee, refused my money, even when I barely had enough for myself. It's kindness," Damien said softly, "like the kindness you show to others." Valeria shrugged, uncomfortable with the compliment. "It's what you do for your community. We take care of each other." They talked for 2 hours, conversation flowing more naturally than ever. Damien shared more about his lonely childhood, about how money had always been a substitute for affection in his family. Valeria spoke about her siblings, about the weight of being responsible for them so young, about dreams she had shelved because survival took precedence. "Sophia wants to study nursing," Valeria said, pride evident in her voice. "She's so smart, so compassionate. She'd be incredible at it." "And the twins. Lucas wants to be a graphic designer. Mateo is obsessed with mechanical engineering. They both have real talent." Her expression darkened slightly. "But college is expensive. I'm saving what I can, but I don't know if it will be enough." Damien felt the familiar impulse to offer to solve the problem with money, to write a check that would cover all future tuition. He literally bit his tongue, reminding himself of the painful lessons he had learned. "What about you?" he asked instead. "What do you want for your future?" Valeria fell silent, turning her coffee cup between her hands. "Honestly, I've never allowed myself to want much for myself. It was always about making sure the kids were okay, that Mom was stable. But if you could want something, anything." A small, dreamy smile crossed her face. "I'd like to finish my education. Maybe study business administration or social work. I'd like to someday open my own business, something that helps the community, a restaurant that offers affordable good meals, that employs people from the neighborhood, or maybe a community center that offers after-school programs for kids." "That's beautiful," Damien said with sincerity. "It's just a dream." Valeria shook her head as if dismissing it. "The best dreams start as impossibilities," Damien responded. "My grandfather started his company with a $500 loan and a dream everyone told him was ridiculous. But he had opportunity, initial capital, even if small, connections probably, education." "He had determination and vision," Damien corrected. "Things you have in abundance. The rest are just tools, and tools can be acquired." Valeria looked at him with curiosity. "Are you trying to convince me to pursue my dreams?" "I'm trying to tell you that you're capable of much more than you allow yourself to imagine, and that you deserve opportunities to realize those capabilities." The conversation drifted to lighter topics, books they had both read recently, movies they wanted to see, childhood memories that had shaped them. Damien talked about his secret obsession with nature documentaries. Valeria confessed her embarrassing love for classic telenovelas she watched with her mother. When they finally parted as afternoon fell, there was a warmth between them that had been absent before. Not the intense, complicated attraction of before, but something more sustainable, mutual respect, genuine enjoyment of each other's company. "Can we do this again?" Damien asked as they walked toward Valeria's bus stop. "Yes," she responded, and this time without hesitation. "I'd like that." Tuesdays became tradition. Each week they met at Doña Carmen's cafe, drank cheap coffee, ate sweet bread, and talked. Damien learned about the distinct personalities of each of Valeria's siblings, about the friendships she maintained in the neighborhood despite her exhausting schedule, about small pleasures that kept her smiling even on difficult days. Valeria began knowing the man behind the fortune. She discovered his passion for classical music, particularly Chopin played late at night. She learned about his dry sense of humor that he rarely showed in professional settings. She recognized his genuine generosity when expressed appropriately, helping without expectations or need for control. One Tuesday, Damien arrived with a carefully considered gift, a small basil plant in a pot. "You mentioned you wanted to grow herbs for cooking but didn't have space," he explained almost shyly. "I thought maybe this could fit on your balcony." Valeria accepted the plant, genuine emotion lighting up her face. It was the perfect gift, thoughtful, practical within appropriate boundaries. Not expensive, not extravagant, just attentive. "Thank you," she said, holding the pot like it was treasure. "It's perfect." Slowly, with patience neither knew they possessed, they were rebuilding something new. Not the unbalanced intensity of before, but solid foundation of friendship, respect, and attraction that grew organically instead of forced. 3 months after their reunion at the community kitchen, Damien made a decision he recognized as risky. After much reflection, after consulting with his therapist, he had begun therapy, another change he never would have imagined before meeting Valeria. After writing and discarding dozens of drafts, he finally put on paper a formal proposal. It was Tuesday, their usual coffee day. When they met at the cafe, Damien had a manila folder under his arm that immediately caught Valeria's attention. "What's that?" she asked with cautious curiosity. "A proposal, but I promise that after you hear it, if the answer is no, I'll respect it completely and never mention it again." Valeria tensed slightly, automatic defenses rising. Damien noticed and raised his hands in a pacifying gesture. "Listen first, please." He opened the folder and took out several carefully organized documents. The first was a handwritten letter in Damien's clear penmanship. "I'll read this first," he said, his hands trembling slightly with nervousness. "Then you can review the documents, ask any questions you have, and take all the time you need to decide." Valeria nodded, mentally preparing herself. Damien took a deep breath and began to read. "Dear Valeria, over the past months, you've shown me what it means to truly live with integrity. You've taught me the difference between charity and respect, between helping and controlling. You've been patient with my mistakes as I learn to be a better person. I've thought a lot about our conversations, about your dreams of education and your eventual community business. I've also thought about my own past mistakes, about how I tried to impose unwanted help in ways that violated your autonomy. What I propose now is different. It's a completely transparent offer, completely on your terms, that you can accept or reject without it affecting our friendship in any way. I would like to offer you a formal loan to finance your education, not a scholarship, not a gift, but a loan with a legal contract, reasonable interest rate, and payment terms that you determine as manageable. You would pay back every penny in time, keeping your dignity and independence completely intact. Additionally, if you decide to accept, I would like to offer my company's services as advisors for when you're ready to start your community business. I won't invest money, I won't have ownership, just business knowledge, connections for suppliers, assistance with business plans. Things you can accept or reject as you need them. Why am I doing this? Not out of guilt, not to buy your affection. I do it because I believe in your capabilities, because your dreams deserve opportunity for realization, and because I've learned that true support means offering tools without controlling how they're used. This offer will be available today, tomorrow, next year. No pressure, no time limit. Your friend, Damien." He finished reading and carefully placed the letter on the table. The next document was a formal loan contract, drafted by lawyers, with clearly established terms, 3% interest rate, significantly lower than any bank but not zero, respecting her need for it to be a real transaction. Flexible monthly payments that she could adjust according to her financial situation. No penalties for early payment. The third document was a letter from his consulting firm, offering pro bono services for community entrepreneurs with no strings attached. Valeria read each document slowly, twice. Her hands trembled slightly. When she finally looked up, she had tears in her eyes. "Why this way?" she asked, voice broken. "Why not just give me the money? You have enough." "Because it's not about what I have. It's about what you need. And what you need is to maintain your dignity, your sense of personal achievement. A gift, no matter how well-intentioned, would take that away. A loan allows you to accept help while maintaining control of your destiny. The interest rate is very low. It's a friendly but real rate. Enough to make it a legitimate transaction, not so high that it's an impossible burden." Valeria wiped her eyes, smiling through tears. "You spent a lot of time thinking about this. Months, and many therapy sessions learning about healthy boundaries." "You're in therapy?" Damien laughed without humor. "Turns out, discovering you've been living emotionally dysfunctionally for decades justifies professional help. My therapist says I'm finally doing real internal work. Whatever those words mean, they seem to imply a lot of crying and life pattern questioning." This time Valeria laughed genuinely, the sound relieving tension in the air. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need." "And if I say no, it will really be okay?" "Absolutely." And Damien meant it sincerely. He had learned painfully that real love meant respecting the other person's choices, even when they weren't the ones you wanted. Valeria nodded slowly, carefully storing the documents in her bag. "Give me 2 weeks." They were the 2 longest weeks of Damien's life. He continued his normal activities: work, volunteering at the kitchen, his newly initiated piano-playing habit, something he had abandoned as a child and recently resumed, therapy sessions. But every moment was tinged with nervous anticipation. Valeria used those 2 weeks wisely. She consulted with her mother, who cried with relief seeing an opportunity for her eldest daughter to finally pursue education. She talked with Sophia, who encouraged her effusively. She even consulted with Doña Carmen, who gave her pragmatic, maternal advice. "Mija, pride can warm you in winter, but it doesn't pay bills or fulfill dreams. If the man is offering help in an honest way, with respect, why punish yourself by rejecting it? Punishing him for past mistakes only punishes yourself." Valeria also did her own research. She visited a bank to ask about student loans, compared terms. Damien's were significantly better, but not impossibly generous. They were fair. At the end of 2 weeks, she had her answer. They met again at the cafe. Valeria placed the documents on the table, now with her signature in appropriate places. "I accept," she said simply, "with one condition." "What?" "I want to sign an additional document establishing that if I ever can't make payments for genuine reasons outside my control, illness, family emergency, accident, whatever, I commit to resuming payments when I'm able, instead of the debt being forgiven. I need to know I'll pay this off completely, no matter how long it takes." Damien felt emotion constrict his throat. Even accepting help, she ensured she maintained her absolute integrity. "I can arrange that document," he said with a hoarse voice. "Thank you for trusting me." "Thank you for finally doing it the right way," Valeria responded, extending her hand to shake officially. Damien took her hand, and in that formal shake felt the fundamental change between them. It wasn't just a business transaction. It was an act of mutual faith, of earned respect, of understanding that they had finally found balance between independence and support, between giving and receiving. With the loan secured, Valeria enrolled in the business administration program at the university. She reduced her hours at the bakery, though didn't eliminate them completely, stubborn as she was about maintaining financial independence, adjusted her schedule at the restaurant to accommodate night classes, and for the first time in years allowed herself to prioritize her own future. The first months were a difficult adjustment. Valeria had been out of the academic environment for 13 years. Concepts that other students absorbed easily required her extra hours of study. But she had something many classmates lacked: real-world experience, practical understanding of how businesses worked from an employee's perspective, determination forged in years of hardship. Damien respected boundaries carefully. He didn't ask about grades, didn't offer unsolicited help with assignments. But when Valeria was struggling with a particular concept of corporate finance and finally asked for help, he dedicated an entire afternoon explaining with patience, using real business examples to illustrate abstract principles. Their Tuesday coffees continued religiously. Now they talked about Valeria's classes, about concepts that fascinated her, about professors she admired. Damien shared stories from his own college days about mistakes he had made in early years of business, lessons learned from failures as much as from successes. "My first company completely failed," he confessed one afternoon. "I was 23, thought I knew everything. I invested everything in technology that became obsolete 6 months after launch. I lost $200,000 of initial investment." $200,000? Valeria almost choked on her coffee. I can't even imagine that amount." "Inheritance from my grandfather. I thought I was invincible. The failure was a humbling but necessary lesson." "What did you do after?" "Took a boring corporate job for 2 years, learned from more experienced people, saved every penny and tried again. This time with humility and an actual business plan." These conversations cemented their connection in new ways. It wasn't the dramatic romance of novels. It was slow building of genuine partnership, of mutual admiration, of support that went in both directions. One day, Valeria arrived at coffee visibly excited. She had received a perfect grade on her first major exam, a case analysis of a failed restaurant business. Her professor had read her analysis aloud to the class as an example of exceptional critical thinking rooted in practical experience. "I'm so proud of you," Damien hugged impulsively, then stopped awkwardly, not sure if physical contact was appropriate. Valeria laughed and completed the hug. "Thank you, it means a lot." That hug, brief and innocent as it was, marked a subtle shift. Casual contact became more natural, hand on shoulder when sharing laughs, brush of fingers when passing documents, comfortable proximity when sitting together. The semester progressed, and Valeria flourished. The dark circles under her eyes began to fade. She gained back weight she had lost during months of double work. Her smile, always present but frequently tinged with fatigue, became brighter, more authentic. Sophia noticed the change. "You look happy," she said one night while Valeria studied at the shared kitchen table. "Really happy. Is it school? Or that man you keep casually mentioning every other conversation?" Valeria felt warmth rise to her cheeks. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Uh-huh. Damien says this. Damien suggests that. Damien told me about." Sophia imitated with a mischievous smile. "Do you think I'm blind?" "He's my friend." "Sure. And I'm president of the country." But the truth was, Valeria herself wasn't sure exactly what Damien was to her now. Friend, definitely. Mentor in business aspects, absolutely. Something more? The question kept her awake some nights, lying in her bed, listening to Sophia's soft breathing in the other room. There was attraction, undeniable, but it was different than at the beginning. It wasn't the obsessive intensity born of mystery and improper boundaries. It was something deeper, more sustainable. Admiration for how he had changed, respect for how he respected her boundaries. Affection built on months of consistently showing his words matched his actions. For his part, Damien navigated similar feelings. His therapist regularly asked him about Valeria, helping him process attraction that had transformed from controlling need to genuine affection. "Do you love her?" Dr. Morales asked during a session. Damien considered carefully. "Yes, but in a different way than before. Before, love was mixed with obsession, with need to possess, to be savior. Now I admire her. I enjoy her company. I want her happiness even if it doesn't include me." "That sounds like mature love." "It feels less dramatic than I expected love to feel." Dr. Morales smiled. "Mature love frequently is. Less fireworks, more constant warmth." During this period, something else was developing. Damien's business had begun expanding towards social responsibility initiatives directly inspired by Valeria. He launched a transparent scholarship program for service workers wanting additional education. Each scholarship had clear criteria, objective application process, and operated completely independent of his personal involvement. When Valeria discovered this through a business newspaper article, she confronted him during their next coffee. "The scholarship program for hospitality workers?" she asked, holding up the newspaper. "Was that you?" Damien nodded. "Inspired by you, but done right this time. Everything is transparent, meritocratic, accessible, no manipulation behind it. This is going to help a lot of people." "That's the idea. Turns out using wealth to create real opportunities instead of imposing unwanted help feels much better." Valeria reached across the table and took his hand. "You're becoming a good person." "I'm trying. I have a good teacher." Their hands remained entwined a moment longer than necessary, the warmth of physical connection reflecting the emotional deepening that neither was yet ready to name. The turning point came unexpectedly, as crises frequently do. It was a Saturday in March. Valeria was working the lunch shift at the restaurant when she received the call every family fears. Matteo, one of the twins, had had an accident during a school soccer game. He was at the hospital with a possibly fractured leg. Valeria rushed out of the restaurant without even removing her apron, her mind filling with terrible images. The hospital was across the city, normally 40 minutes on public transportation. She stood on the corner, desperate for a taxi that seemed impossible to find on a busy weekend, when an elegant car stopped beside her. It was Damien. "Get in," he said simply. "I'll take you." "How?" "I was having lunch nearby. Saw you rush out of the restaurant. You looked distressed." During the drive to the hospital, Valeria explained through sobs what little she knew. Damien drove fast but safely, offering calming reassurance. "Children are resilient. Young bones heal quickly. He's probably more scared than seriously hurt." His words proved prophetic. Matteo had fractured his tibia, required a cast and crutches, but would be completely fine. When Valeria burst into the emergency room, she found her 14-year-old brother trying to be brave, while tears ran down his face. Her mother was there, holding his hand, and Lucas was in the corner looking guilty, though the accident wasn't his fault. "I'm okay," Matteo insisted when Valeria hugged him. "It just hurts a little." Damien had stayed discreetly in the waiting room, giving the family privacy. But when the bills came, when admissions began discussing treatment costs with Valeria's mother, the financial reality hit hard. Insurance would cover some, but deductible and co-pays still added up to an amount that would make the family budget unstable for months. Valeria felt familiar panic rising, the impossible math of how to cover an emergency when you already lived on a narrow margin. Her mind began automatic calculations. She could ask for extra hours, maybe delay the monthly loan payment to Damien, cut other expenses. "Valeria." Damien's voice behind her startled her. She had been so lost in panic she hadn't heard him approach. I need to handle this," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I just need a moment to think. Let me help." "Damien, I can't just—" "Not as a gift. As an extension of the loan. Additional terms. Same interest rate. You add it to what you already owe. Pay it when you can. But right now, in this moment, let me cover medical costs so Matteo can receive the care he needs without you worrying about numbers." Valeria looked at him, this man who had learned so painfully to respect boundaries, now offering help in a way that honored her need for autonomy, even in crisis. "The terms would be the same," she confirmed, voice trembling. "Exactly the same. I can have additional documents prepared by Monday. For now, you just need to sign authorization letting me cover today's bills." The tears finally fell, a mixture of relief and gratitude and love she could no longer deny. "Thank you," she whispered. Damien stayed with her during the remaining 5 hours at the hospital. He met her mother properly for the first time, shaking hands with nervous respect, while she evaluated him with perceptive maternal eyes. He met the twins, quiet and observant Lucas, Matteo making brave jokes despite the pain. He bought sandwiches for everyone from the hospital cafeteria when he realized no one had eaten. When he finally drove Valeria back home that night, her apartment filled with Matteo on the sofa, with his leg elevated, Sophia preparing a late meal, their mother organizing a mattress on the floor to sleep near the injured twin. Damien was invited to stay for impromptu dinner. It was chaotic and noisy and perfect. Lucas bombarded Damien with questions about luxury car engineering. Sophia subtly interrogated him about his intentions with her sister. Valeria's mother observed him with a mixture of gratitude and fierce maternal protectiveness. Matteo, elevated by painkillers, made unfiltered comments about Valeria's millionaire boyfriend. "He's not my boyfriend," Valeria corrected automatically, blushing. "Why not?" Matteo asked with the unfiltered frankness of a drugged teenager. "He clearly likes you and you like him. What's with all the drama?" Mouths fell silent. Everyone looked between Valeria and Damien. Damien, sitting in a folding kitchen chair with a plate of pasta on his lap, surrounded by the warmth of a real family for the first time in his adult life, made a decision. "He's right," he said calmly. "I like Valeria very much. I've liked her since the day I saw her being kind to a stranger on a rainy day. I've made terrible mistakes learning how to express that appropriately, but the feelings never changed." The apartment fell into complete silence. Valeria stared at him with wide eyes frozen. "But," Damien continued, looking at her directly, "I learn slowly, but I eventually learn. Your feelings, your choices, your time are yours. I'm here as a friend if that's all you want. I'm here as more if you ever decide you want that. No pressure, no expectation, just honesty." Valeria's mother spoke first, her voice firm but kind. "That was nice. Now does anyone want more pasta?" The moment broke into nervous laughter, conversation gradually resuming normalcy. But something fundamental had changed in the air, truth finally spoken aloud that couldn't be unspoken. When Damien finally left that night, Valeria walked him to the door. In the narrow hallway with flickering fluorescent light and the persistent smell of neighbors' meals, they stood together in silence for a moment. "Thank you," Valeria said, "for everything today." "You don't need to thank me for being present." "Still thank you," she paused, gathering courage, "and about what you said inside. You don't need to respond. It wasn't a declaration that requires immediate answer. But I want to respond." Valeria took a deep breath. "I like you too. You scare me because I like you. For months I protected myself from admitting it because liking someone, especially someone from a world so different from mine, felt dangerous. And now I think maybe the risk is worth it. Maybe love doesn't have to be about similar worlds. Maybe it's about people who make each other better." Damien felt like his heart would explode. "Is that a yes? To trying? Officially?" Valeria smiled, bright and genuine. "It's a cautious, optimistic, terrified yes, but yes." He leaned in and kissed her softly, delicately, as if she were a precious thing that might break. Valeria responded, hands sliding around his neck, pouring months of contained longing into the contact. When they finally separated, both were smiling. "Good night, Damien," Valeria said. "Good night, Valeria." And as he walked down the hallway toward the elevator that probably wouldn't work, Valeria leaned against her apartment door, heart full of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The months that followed were careful balancing, learning how to build a romantic relationship on the foundation of friendship they had so laboriously cultivated. Damien forced himself consciously, constantly, to resist old impulses. When Valeria mentioned a problem, he reminded himself to listen instead of solve. When he wanted to buy her an extravagant gift, he opted for meaningful gestures instead. Plants for her growing collection, a book by an author she loved with a personal note inside, tickets to a classical music concert they would attend together. Valeria learned to accept appropriate help, without feeling it compromised her independence. When Damien offered to pick her up after night classes instead of taking the bus through dark neighborhoods, she learned to say yes, recognizing it was a gesture of care, not control. When she got sick with flu during finals week, and he appeared with homemade soup, surprisingly good for someone who rarely cooked, she accepted with gratitude. They introduced each other to their worlds carefully. Damien met Valeria's close friends from the neighborhood, sitting in modest living rooms drinking coffee and listening to childhood stories of Valeria that made her blush. Valeria attended a business event as his companion, dressed in a simple but elegant outfit they had bought together, him insisting on paying, her insisting on reimbursing him gradually, finally compromising it would be an advance birthday gift. The business event was revealing. Valeria observed Damien in his element, confident, articulate, commanding the room with natural ease. But she also noticed subtle differences others might not see. He declined conversations he would have cultivated before if he perceived inauthenticity. He spent more time with young entrepreneurs and minor business partners than with high-profile investors. His definition of success seemed to have expanded beyond simple financial profits. "You were watching me all night," Damien commented during the drive home. "You were different, more genuine, less playing a role." "I've been thinking about what kind of legacy I want to leave. Being the guy who accumulated the biggest wealth or the guy who used resources to create real positive impact. Thanks to you, I'm choosing the second option." Valeria reached over and intertwined her fingers with his. "I'm proud of you." Simple words, but they meant the world to Damien. Valeria's first semester at university ended with honors. Her GPA was one of the highest in her cohort, her professors constantly commenting on unique perspectives she brought from real experience. She began preliminary conversations with the university's entrepreneurship services about her eventual dream of a community restaurant, refining the vision into a viable business that served social purpose. One Saturday, Damien surprised her with a trip to a rural area outside the city. They drove 2 hours to a small town where a college friend of his had opened a micro-farm and farm-to-table restaurant. "I thought you'd want to see a business model similar to what you imagine," Damien explained as they walked through rows of organic vegetables. "Paolo can share lessons from his 5 years operating." They spent the whole day learning how Paolo managed supply chain, trained local staff, balanced profitability with price accessibility, built community connections. Valeria absorbed every detail, asking questions, taking mental notes. During dinner at Paolo's restaurant that night, eating vegetables they had seen growing hours before, Damien watched Valeria glow with excitement talking about her plans. He realized this type of support, facilitating connections and experiences that empowered her instead of replacing her efforts, felt infinitely more satisfying than anything he had tried before. "I love you," he said impulsively, interrupting her animated analysis of pricing strategies. Valeria blinked, blushing. "In the middle of my speech about profit margins, especially during your speech about profit margins. I love you when you're passionate, when you're dreaming, when you're being brilliant." "I love you too," she responded, her smile softer now. "I love you for bringing me here, for believing in my dreams, for finally understanding how to support me without smothering me." That exchange of love declarations, natural and unforced, was healing in ways neither could fully articulate. Damien's business continued evolving. He launched an investment fund specifically for socially oriented businesses, offering capital to entrepreneurs creating positive community impact. Criteria were rigorous but fair, the process completely transparent. Valeria joked he was becoming a conscious capitalist. "There are worse things to become," he responded with a smile. But challenges also arose. Class differences occasionally created tension. When Damien casually mentioned considering buying a vacation property, Valeria tensed, remembering that for her vacation meant a day off work. When she stressed about monthly bills, he had to remind himself that offering to pay wasn't the appropriate solution. They navigated these moments with increasingly better communication. Therapy helped, both attended now separately and occasionally together for preventive couples therapy. Radical honesty helped. Fundamental love helped. 1 full year after their first kiss in that narrow hallway, Damien organized dinner in a meaningful place. Not the luxury restaurant where they met, but Doña Carmen's humble cafe. The elderly woman had closed the cafe for the night, decorating it with fairy lights and simple floral arrangements. Just Damien, Valeria, and Doña Carmen as waitress and witness. Over a meal of sweet bread and excellent coffee, Damien spoke with his heart exposed. "This past year has been more meaningful than all the previous 39. You've taught me how to love appropriately, how to support without controlling, how to use privilege to amplify instead of impose. You've made me a better person." "You changed me too," Valeria interrupted softly. "You taught me that accepting help doesn't make me weak, that vulnerability is strength, that sharing burdens is part of love." Damien took a deep breath, pulling a small box from his pocket. Valeria felt her heart accelerate. "It's not a ring," he clarified quickly. "Yet, I don't want to rush you, but it's a promise." He opened the box, revealing a delicate pendant, a small basil plant in silver filigree, remembering his first appropriate gift. "I promise to keep growing, keep learning, keep respecting your autonomy while we build a shared life. When you're ready, if you're ever ready for the next step, I'll be here. But for now, this is a promise that I choose you, every day, consciously." Valeria cried as he placed the pendant around her neck. "It's perfect. You're perfect. Well, not perfect, but perfectly imperfect in ways that fit my imperfections." They laughed and cried and kissed, while Doña Carmen discreetly took photos on her old phone, shedding her own sentimental tears. The community restaurant Races opened its doors on a vibrant Saturday in May, located in a renovated building in the neighborhood where Valeria grew up. It wasn't a luxurious establishment. It was exactly what she had imagined, welcoming, accessible, filled with life. The walls displayed art from local artists, including several framed comics by Lucas, who was now studying graphic design on a scholarship he had won on his own merit. Plants filled every available corner, many grown from cuttings from Valeria's original collection. The menu offered quality food at prices working families could afford, the subsidy covered by a sliding price model where customers with more resources paid a little extra. Sophia, now in her second year of nursing school, worked part-time as human resources manager, applying principles she had learned in classes. Mateo, leg completely healed, helped with maintenance and technology when not in high school classes. Valeria's mother handled accounting with the meticulousness her daughter had clearly inherited. Valeria, with university degree in hand and experience from 2 years as assistant manager at the restaurant, where she had been a waitress, a genuinely earned promotion, commanded her kitchen with a mixture of compassion and competence. Her graduation thesis on socially sustainable business models had won awards and was being considered for publication. Damien was there, of course, but not as an investor or benefactor. As a minor partner who owned 15% of the business, Valeria's insistence after he provided part of the initial capital as formal investment, not gift, but mainly as a companion who helped when needed, offered advice when requested, and celebrated every success with genuine pride. His official proposal had come 6 months earlier, not in a luxury restaurant or exotic destination, but in the community kitchen where they had reunited. Don Ramiro was witness, crying openly. The wedding was planned for fall, small ceremony in the neighborhood park, reception at Races. "Are you nervous?" Damien asked Valeria, as they observed the line of customers waiting patiently outside for the noon opening. "Terrified," she admitted with a smile. "What if no one comes? What if the food is terrible? What if—" "It's going to be perfect," he interrupted gently, kissing her temple. "Because it comes from your heart, from your vision, from your work." When the doors opened, a flood of neighbors, friends, family, and curious customers filled the space. Doña Carmen was the first customer, ordering coffee and a concha like old times. Don Ramiro brought an entire group from the community kitchen. Valeria's university professors appeared, curious to see theory turned into practice. The day was beautiful chaos, constant service, customers appreciating honest food served with genuine warmth, staff navigating initial challenges with humor and patience, Valeria everywhere simultaneously ensuring perfection. During a brief afternoon lull, Damien found Valeria in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee, watching her materialize dream through the window overlooking the dining room. "Happy?" he asked. Valeria considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. She looked around. Her business built with her own hands and mind, her family working beside her, her community supporting her. This man who had learned to love her appropriately standing by her side. "Yes," she said simply, "happy in a way I never thought possible." Damien took her hand, feeling the basil pendant under her chef's shirt, soon to be replaced by a wedding ring. "Me too." In that moment, with the noise of a thriving restaurant in the background and the aroma of honest food filling the air, both recognized the complete truth of their journey. It wasn't a story of a millionaire saving a needy waitress. It was a story of two people broken in different ways, meeting at a crucial moment, making painful mistakes, learning difficult lessons, and finally building something new together. Something based on mutual respect, genuine admiration, and understanding that real love isn't about rescuing or being rescued. It's about being present, growing together, honoring each other's autonomy while building healthy interdependence. That night, after the last customer left and staff cleaned up, after family celebrated with toasts and hugs, Valeria and Damien walked hand in hand through the neighborhood streets. They passed the building where she grew up, the park where she played as a child, corners that held memories of difficult years. "Do you ever imagine what your life would be like if I had never entered that restaurant that rainy day?" Damien asked. Valeria considered. "I probably would still be working double shifts, saving every penny, dreaming dreams that seemed impossible. I would have made it eventually, I think. It just would have taken me longer, and it would have been lonelier." "And you don't mind that I shortened that time, that I provided resources that made the path easier?" "No," she answered honestly, "because you finally did it the right way. You didn't replace my journey, you just walked beside me, offering a hand when I stumbled, believing in me when I doubted. That's not rescuing, that's partnership." They stopped under a flickering streetlight, the same one where she used to wait for the bus during those struggling years. Now standing here with the man she loved, her own thriving business, flourishing family, complete education, a future full of possibilities she had earned and deserved. "Thank you," Valeria said suddenly. "For what? For learning, for changing, for loving me enough to respect my need for autonomy, for being the man I needed, not the savior I didn't ask for." Damien pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "Thank you for being patient while I learned, for seeing me as capable of change, for loving me despite my monumental mistakes." They remained there under the streetlight, two people from impossibly different worlds who had found their way to something beautifully shared. Not because money bought love, not because circumstance created obligation, but because both had chosen, consistently and consciously, to grow toward and with each other. The basil pendant on Valeria's neck caught the streetlight, a small reminder of how far they had come from inappropriate gestures to genuine love. And as they walked toward the future together, hand in hand under emerging stars, both understood the most important lesson their journey had taught. True luxury isn't what money can buy. It's finding someone who sees you completely, who respects your autonomy absolutely, who walks beside you instead of in front or behind. Someone with whom you can build a life based on mutual choice, deep respect and love, that grows from understanding that the best relationships aren't about rescuing or being rescued. They're about growing together, roots intertwined, but each maintaining space to flourish independently, mutually providing fertile ground where dreams can take root and love can grow truly strong.